Hi, I'm Renee, retired educator turned wine bar conversationalist. This is Conversations Over Wine, where wisdom is poured and stories are shared. Each week, I like to slow down, pour a glass, and talk about life's lessons. Aging with intention, what really matters as we grow older. I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin. So this is episode 13. Wow. Pretty excited about how far we've come and the different topics that we've covered. And this week, I want to kind of revisit a couple of things that we've talked about, and then also kind of dive into just this week at the wine bar that I work at and some of the conversations and connections that I witnessed this week. But on the revisiting end, we talked a few weeks ago about, at the beginning of each year, we set some goals for ourselves or whatever you want to call them, but sometimes they can just be goals. And if we don't put anything into action, they don't really go anywhere. So let's check in and see how we're doing with our goals. So maybe think back to what you said you might want to work on this year, and let's check in with those. For me, a couple of things that I mentioned I wanted to focus in on this year. Well, some things were just a continuation of different areas that I addressed in the previous year, but I also wanted to be more intentional about my finances, and tied in with that is just overall buying less. But when I do buy, being more intentional about my purchases. And we've also spoken lately about dating ourselves. And so those are a couple of things I want to check in with first before we talk about some of the conversations and connections at Salute this week. So what about some of my goals? So as I mentioned, I talked about financial, buying less, buying intentionally. I set a goal for myself of only purchasing one clothing item that was brand new per month. I did say that I would allow, some thrifting of clothing pieces that I might need because I have lost weight. And so I've needed to do some of that. Also on this slow journey to replace things in my closet that may not only be too big now, but also the materials in them are not natural fibers. So I'm kind of on a slow journey to help make that happen. So I said, okay, I'm just going to buy one new thing a month as far as clothing is concerned. And then the rest have to be thrifted. And if I thrift it, it has to also be, at least 80%, 75% natural fibers, hopefully 100%. So how am I doing with that? So we're in March, early March right now. And so January, February, I only purchased one new clothing item each month. And those were both 100% natural fibers. And then I did do some thrifting, but everything that I thrifted was natural fibers and helped to fill a gap in my closet for things that no longer fit. So I'm doing really well with that, and it's helping to kind of rewire my brain from, that they say you get like this dopamine hit from shopping. And I will say that now that I'm looking at tags on clothing items and looking to see what they're made of, and then if I'm online looking at what those clothing items are made of, and it's really helped a lot. If I'm looking only for natural fibers, or at least the majority of the item must be natural fibers, that's really helped with just purchases that I didn't need to make. Just looking at items going, oh, that's cute, I think I'll get that. So now it really has helped me a lot. It's helped me to be more intentional. It has helped to kind of slow that down. Sometimes when I know I might be susceptible to that, searching for that dopamine hit of a purchase, I may open up my book, or I may open up my journal, or I may just kind of step away and go for a walk. Just other ways to get that dopamine hit that you might get from shopping. But it has definitely helped me when I look at tags, because it's really disappointing to see how many companies that I thought of as, oh my gosh, this is a higher end company and anything you buy from there is going to be great materials. And that's just not true. And when you see these companies charging premium prices and the majority of the clothing item is plastic, it kind of takes that allure away just naturally. So I'm doing really well with that goal that I set. So not only did I set that goal, but I also took steps, and I'm going to continue to check in on those goals, not just have, New Year's resolutions and then you write them down or you speak them and then they just kind of, fall by the wayside. But you have to take steps, right? You have to be very intentional and you have to do it. Otherwise, it's just a goal. It's just something you would like to attain. But if you're not doing anything, it doesn't really mean anything, right? So I'm doing really well with that. And the financial part, if you recall, I talked about one of the things I wanted to do this year, besides automatic savings, which I have continued to do. I wanted to also start investing, and I have done that. So I am doing some micro investing with the Acorns app. And the way that works is you connect it to your checking account, and it takes whatever the amount was, rounded up. It takes that difference. So let's say you purchase something for $12.50, then it's going to round it up to 13 and take that 50 cents and invest it. So it's connected to your checking account or checking accounts, and will take that rounded up amount and invest it. So I started doing that, and I also opened a Vanguard account. And so I've been doing some investing in some ETF stocks. So that's pretty exciting. It's an area I wanted to get into and wanted to learn more about, and I've done it. So yay. So those are a couple of things that I set as goals for myself at the beginning of the year. And instead of just saying them or writing them down and then not checking back in with them, I have taken proactive steps and implemented those things into my life. And I feel really good about that. I took the steps I needed to take. And so as of the beginning of March, I'm doing well with those things. So I just wanted to touch in on that and maybe encourage you to think about some of those goals that you set for yourself this year and check in with yourself. See how you're doing. See what steps you've taken. See if there's things that are working really well for you, and maybe there's some things that are not, and you need to readjust those and see what you need to do a little bit differently. And there's nothing wrong with that as well. Something else we talked about in one of the episodes was dating yourself. That is something I'm pretty passionate about. Yes, I realize I'm single, but I don't think dating yourself is just for single people. I think it's for all people. I think everybody needs some time to themselves alone to just kind of, feed that part of themselves, to encourage you to branch out on your own and not let the availability of others prevent you from doing some of the things that you would like to do. So what are some of the solo dates I've done lately? Well, I'm thinking back to last Friday. I went to a very authentic Italian place. No, wait a minute. It was Saturday, last Saturday. I went to this authentic Italian restaurant that I had heard amazing things about. And I love Italy, love all things Italian. So I've been really excited about visiting this place. Super cool. It's in this little alleyway, which, yeah, that's really cool. Went down there, went to this amazing restaurant, sat at the bar by myself, had an amazing glass of wine, of an Italian Valpolicella, and had a great meal. And just sat there at the bar and enjoyed all of it. That was phenomenal. So that was a date myself that I really enjoyed. I hope that you've taken some time for yourself and gone somewhere or done something that you've wanted to do. Maybe it's because others can't go, or maybe it's just because you would like to do that by yourself. So don't forget to, cultivate that in your life. It's really important that we get out and do things on our own independently and not let the availability of others prevent us from doing that. So I continue to encourage you to date yourself, regardless of your relationship status. So let's go ahead and dive into this week's topic. So as you know, I work at a wine bar. And the whole premise of this, podcast is conversations over wine. And I've talked about the fact that, I work at a wine bar and it can be a very interesting job. And this week, it was just kind of interesting to me to kind of sit back and see some of the conversations that were made, connections that were made between previous strangers. And so I wanted to share some of that because I think there are some lessons to be learned from some of the things I observed this week. So on Tuesday, it wasn't a particularly busy night, but I just had some interesting customers. So there was an out-of-town sales rep who came in and sat down at the bar, and I knew right off the bat as I was explaining the wine wall and our wines. We have like 42 dry wines on the wall, and I was talking to her about that. And she just, because she kind of plugged in, started telling me some things about wine. I was like, okay, well, she does. She knows a lot about wine, so this is really interesting. And so she came in by herself, picked a little spot at the bar. And then there was this other younger girl, I don't know, maybe mid-20s, that also came in. She came in by herself as well. Yay for these ladies not being afraid to date themselves. She came in by herself, and she came in and sat down at a little table. She had a book with her, and then she had this little bag. And if you listen to my episode about this analog revival that seems to be going on, where more and more people seem to be wanting to unplug, unwind, read books, write in their journal, learn to crochet, cross stitch, doing puzzles, all of these things that are non-digital. There is this movement going on, this revival, and it's super exciting to me. Well, this young lady came in and she had a little bag, and one of the things I mentioned in that episode was there seems to be more and more people carrying these little bags or totes, and they call them their analog bags, and it has just different things in there. Well, I have one, and in mine I have some crossword puzzles, I have some adult coloring books, I have my novel that I'm reading right now, and I have a journal in there to kind of take notes and write my thoughts and ideas down. Well, this young lady had one of those. And I thought it was just so cute. So I talked to her a little bit about that. And she was like, yeah, I just want to come in and, have a few drinks and read my book. And I told her how at the wine bar we were now having analog nights on Monday nights. So I encouraged her to come on Monday nights and enjoy some of that. She was just the sweetest young lady. Just very sweet and engaging, all of that. And she was writing in her journal, reading her book. And what is interesting is, the lady that I spoke about first, the one who came in, she was a sales rep, and she sat down at the bar. The other young lady sat down at a table a little ways away. And those two ladies ended up connecting. So the lady at the wine bar that was setting up at the bar, that was a sales rep, she was talking out loud about how she used to be an educator and then, found herself kind of wanting to do something a little different. So now she's a sales rep for a company that sells materials to the schools. And the other young lady was listening in, and later in the evening, she approached the sales rep and they made this connection. And the younger lady was looking for something else that she could be doing, but related to education, but maybe outside of the classroom. So those two ladies connected. And I thought that was super exciting. And also just amazing that young lady, was confident enough and decided, hey, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go talk to this lady. Maybe this is a connection that I need to make. Then we also had a wine club member who tends to come in every Tuesday. She also ended up connecting with the sales rep, because that wine club member who comes in every Tuesday evening, she is also an educator. And she had actually last year worked for the same company that the sales rep works for. So they ended up exchanging numbers and talking about education and talking about the sales company, the company that the sales rep works for. They just ended up having this long conversation. That was really cool to watch. Then we had these two friends that were sitting out on the patio. They had never been to the wine bar before. And I enjoyed watching them because it appeared, sometimes it's just observation on my end as I'm working, selling wine, talking to customers. You see people come in and you just kind of sometimes fill in the blanks in your mind of what their relationship is or what brought them in. And these two ladies, it appeared that they had not gotten together in a long time, but they were super excited to be there and to catch up. And they just had the best time sitting out on the patio. So it was so fun to kind of watch them out there. And they were, asking me about what some of the events were at the wine bar and other things that they could come in and do. Then there was another lady that came in, and she also sat down at the bar next to the sales rep. And she began to connect with her as well. And then with me was asking about hosting a networking group at the bar. And then all these conversations are going on amongst all these different people. And other than the two friends that were sitting out on the patio, everybody else had come in there by themselves. And I loved that. I loved to see that confidence. I loved to see that they were not afraid to approach each other and make some connections and talk about, maybe something that they had in common or something they wanted to share. It was just a really cool thing to observe. And then last night, there was a singles mixer at the wine bar. And so there were lots of observations to be made from that, for sure. Before the singles mixer started, there were two ladies that came in, And they were just the sweetest ladies. They were sitting there just enjoying each other's company. I would assume that they were friends from long ago because they had all kinds of stuff that they were sharing with each other. And so as the people for the singles mixer began to come into the wine bar, you could tell they were kind of curious about what was going on. And so I went over there and I explained, okay, there's a lot of people that's going to be coming in. I just want to let y'all know. And so they both kind of like looked alert and curious. And I said, well, are either of you single? And one of them was like, yeah, I'm single. Tell me more about this singles group. I happen to be a member of that singles group. So I filled her in, told her about the mixer that was about to happen, and she ended up staying. And I introduced her to the main admin of the singles group, and she ended up staying and building relationships. I watched her speak with several different people, and there was one other lady I saw her talk to for about 30-45 minutes, and that was just so amazing to watch that. So what does all this mean? I think what I'm getting at is just we all have a need, an innate need to connect with others. And sometimes those connections are made by chance rather than intention. Sometimes you could be sitting someplace like that lady was with her friend, find out there's a mixer about to happen that's for single people, and you're single, and you've been looking for a group like that, and there you are. It all just falls into place. Or the young lady that came in on Tuesday night who is just there reading her book and writing in her journal, and she's been looking for something to do other than work, being in the classroom. And then, oh my gosh, there's a sales rep sitting at the bar who does something that would be of interest to her. It's just amazing how these things just fall into place. And I love the brave steps that I saw people go through to branch out and to put themselves out there. It's not always easy to do that. That young lady just stood up and walked up to the bar and started talking to that sales rep. And, some of the people that came to the mixer on Thursday night, there was one gentleman that I spoke to. You could tell he was visibly nervous and uncomfortable. And so I talked to him a little bit. And he was like, I've never done anything like this. Never. And so I introduced him to a couple of people that I know well in the the singles group. And so just, thinking about how he had to get up the nerve to come out and do that. But how important it is that we make connections. And sometimes they're intentional, like his, and some of them they're by chance. Like the young lady, the young educator that came in just to read her book and write in her journal and ended up meeting a sales rep for a company that she may end up going to work for. So it just kind of reinforced a couple of things for me. One, wine slows us down, right? So going into a place like that, sipping wine is a little bit different, I think, than a cocktail or something like that. We just kind of slow down, relaxes our mind, and then we can be in a place sometimes where connections can be made intentionally or by chance. So just be open maybe to looking for opportunities for that, because we all need connections, and stepping out of our comfort zone and going to some place where maybe you've never been, or you could be a regular, and being open to what you can learn from others and maybe a connection that can be made. And sometimes those connections can totally change your life. Maybe someone last night at the mixer met somebody that could end up being the love of their life. Maybe that young lady that connected with that sales rep, maybe she changes her career. You never know what a connection could bring you. So maybe if we just open ourselves up to that and be willing to step out of our comfort zone, we never know what might could happen, right? Anyway, I wanted to share some of the things that I observed this week at the wine bar. It's always interesting there. I meet so many interesting, cool people. So maybe think of something this week that you could do that's a little out of your comfort zone. Make some connections with some people. Or even put yourself in a situation where maybe some unplanned connections could be made. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And if you did, please take a few minutes to like, comment, download the podcast, or even share it with somebody that you think might enjoy some of the things that we talk about. I would appreciate that. And I want you to know that I thank you and I appreciate you for joining me as we sipped, savored, and reflected on this beautiful life that we've been given. And until next time, friends, cheers.